So the first thing we're going to look at is an add-on called Healer Stat Weights, and it's an amazingly convenient tool, and it's probably what most healers or new healers should be using at the start because it is so convenient. It just basically is an add-on that you get from Twitch client or whatever. You install it, and it won't look like this at the very start. This is my example run from LFR using Fed Devour. But it'll probably be looking at intellect is going to be 1.0 all the time and everything else is going to be 0, 0, 0. That's just because this add-on doesn't give you the stat priorities straight away. You need to actually do content, and based on how you heal, what talents you use, what Azeroth traits you're using, and things like that, it will give you a stat priority on how you did. So it's not really a substitute for class knowledge. You should have a general understanding of the stat, not that stat priority, the gameplay of your healing class. And once you know what spells to use, this stat priority or this stat priority tool will give you good values for what you should be stacking or what you should be using. So it's extremely easy to use. It works for every single healing class out there. At the very start, it stemmed from Resto Druid stat weight record that was extremely popular in Legion, and it was ported in BfA to be available for every single healer out there. It was made by, you know, the top tier crafters for each of the class. Did a lot of work towards this, and it's I highly appreciate all the work they did because it is so efficient and so easy to use. So you can see that this is one of the questions I get. What do these numbers mean? And people might get confused about it sometimes, but overall intellect is always going to be 1.0. This is like your base default value. And then after that, your crit, haste, versatility, mastery, and leech will have different values. So basically, the highest value means that stat is the best. So in this situation for Fed Devour, you can see that my intellect is 1 and everything else is below 1. So that means int is the best stat for me. Critical strike is 0.82, which is again is below 1.0. We also look at haste, which is 0.28, which is extremely low, but I'll talk about the different ways to actually calculate haste, and haste is quite complex in terms of getting the right value for it. Versatility is 0.85, which deems versatility as my best secondary stat, but not by that much, very close to critical strike. You also see mastery is 0.67 and leech at 0.14, which is extremely low for leech, but that's just because I'm doing LFR content, which is not very challenging. There's not a lot of damage happening to me. If I was to do a progression fight where there is like legitimate damage coming out, leech is most likely going to be my best secondary stat. But we also have to consider that leech, it's all random. You cannot aim towards a gear with leech, it's just gonna happen. So it's extremely good to actually use this tool with things like pawn. Let's say for example you get a ring that has a socket in it. Sockets have jumped up in terms of the value or the item level value that they have in Legion or in BfA by a ton, and especially let's say you get a ring with a socket and leech on it, there is a high chance that that's going to contribute so much item level. So I will talk about pawn add-on and how you can import the stat weights from healer stat weights into pawn and determine comparison between different items. So first of all, like I said before, crit or versatility is my second best stat for that fight because it is extreme. It is the highest, but it's not better than intellect. If versatility was 1.85, that would mean that versatility was almost double the value of intellect, which is probably not going to happen in BfA. For it's not gonna, Blizzard does not want it to happen. Blizzard doesn't want secondary stats to be double the effect of your primary stat. In Legion, that was happening all the time, but the general consensus in BfA is that item level is going to be a king, depending on which item slot we're talking about. Like I mentioned, rings and sockets and things like that can be hard to determine. So let's look at some of the options available for when you're going to be using this add-on, and there are options that you need to enable. First of all, based on the content you're doing, this add-on will only log the content that you want. So in my example, I've selected LFR raids, normal, heroic, mythics, and mythic plus dungeons for this specific video. So this add-on was working for me in this content. So if I do LFR, it'll start logging. If I do mythic plus, it'll start logging. But if I do heroic dungeon, it won't work. So make sure you have the content selected here, the content that you always do, or just click always enable. Now there's also important values in terms of haste. So you see this: exclude haste effects on cast time, use HPM over HPCT. So this is quite important. A very generic answer towards which haste value you should be using. I'll say that you should tick this value. So use HPM over HPCT in raids. HPM means healing per mana, and HPCT means healing per cast time. If you're doing 5-man content, you want to untick this, so you'll be using HPCT instead of HPM. Now the difference between the two, that's what I talk about why Haste is quite hard to calculate. HPM, which is healing per mana, it effectively models Haste bonus to mana efficiency. So this is your HPM, is your efficiency weight. You want to use that primarily in raids because it will take mana into consideration. If you take Resto Druid as an example, HPM will count or will work with HOTS in terms of how Haste increases or at least adds additional ticks to HOTS and things like that. So it will model that for HPM. If we look at HPCT, which is healing per cast time, it basically shows the healing bonus in terms of being able to cast your spells quicker due to haste. So during healing windows using HPCT, you'll be able to cast spells quicker, equals more spells being cast, equals more healing. But that does not take mana into consideration. So technically, if you really wanted to go more in depth, the overall value of haste would probably be somewhere in between HPCT and HPM. For an example, if you are doing a raid content and you're running out of mana, your haste value would probably be somewhere closer to HPM. But if you're doing raid content, you're doing a boss and you're finishing with a ton of mana left, you might want to assign haste value closer to HPCT, healing per cast time. So that's what I mean. It's a bit more difficult to assign a true value for haste, but like I mentioned at the very start, very generic way of doing it is to assign HPM in raids, HPCT in 5-man content. Now there is also some variations happening in 5-man content as well, because you'll notice that while haste could be very good stat in 5-mans as well, because you can drink between every pull, you can, you make sure that your tank gives you a break sometimes and things like that. So you probably always want to use HPCT, but at really high Mythic Plus keys, and you'll notice that a lot of people start doing that. And I talked about Mistweavers and Holy Paladins, and there's a couple of other classes as well, but really high keys, all of a sudden, even though haste can be considered a very good stat, they're having mana issues. On high tyrannical keys, on a plus 20 tyrannical key, the boss lasts for 6 minutes, you need to maintain 20 to 30k HPS, which can be insane, and there are bosses like that, and all of a sudden you might have mana issues. So I've seen more and more people at really high-end keys trying to use that HPM value for those keys in Mythic Plus over HPCT. But without going too much into this whole explanation, if you're doing general keys, you're not having any mana issues, HPCT in 5-mans, HPM in raids, and after that you can start going somewhere in between based on how much mana you have left and things like that, and using your own experiences. And this tool is great for helping you with that. So let's say now you want to use your newly acquired secondary stat weights to determine which piece of gear you want to use for a specific fight. Now, in terms of raid min-maxing, I use this add-on quite a lot for progression fights. Let's say, for example, we're killing the boss in like 40% HP or stuff like that, because the add-on starts recording the minute the combat starts. So during progression, let's say we're having a decent attempt on a boss, and I can have a clear picture, or at least an estimate of how my secondary stat values are going to appear. Because if you're wiping in the first 30 seconds of a boss fight, the secondary stats, you won't have a clear image. But if you're having a decent attempt on a boss, all of a sudden I notice that, hey, my mastery is getting a way bigger evaluation than I thought it would be, I maybe should swap in some mastery rings. So what I usually do is I'll get, like in this example, I'm using the Fetid Devour one, the L4 stat weights, but what I do, I click on this icon and all of a sudden I have this stat string available to me. I Control A to select it all and Control C to copy it, and then I go into Pawn add-on, which is a completely separate add-on that I recommend people to get. You type in /pawn, which will open a window. You'll see a window like this, and you'll go to Scale. In Scale, you will go to Import, and you'll Control V, this string, and you click OK. And all of a sudden you can see my Monk Healer stat weight, Fetid Devour. Stat weights, you can see my crit evaluated pretty high, 8.2. My haste really low, my mastery being okay, and versatility being extremely high as well. So all of a sudden you see my stat weights. And then I want to see, for example, I have this ring here that is 370 and has a socket in it. Is this worth for me to be using for this fight? Because I have another ring, 385, that gives me crit and haste. This is a higher item level ring, and this is what I meant by saying rings with gems and like, you know, things like leech can be extremely hard to evaluate. But all of a sudden I put this in the add-on here, and I can compare it, and I can see that my ring 370 with socket is being valued way higher than my 385 ring. And you can also go to the gem section, and you can see that the gem that I should be enchanting this ring with should be 40 versatility, because if you go back to the weights, you notice that my versatility is the highest one by a little bit, 0.85. So I know that for this specific fight, I'm using the right stats, I'm using the right rings. But I have done this for a lot of the progression fights, and I've done the same thing for 5-mans as well. So if you've done a whole 5-man dungeon, your add-on will be able to record the whole dungeon. You can use the total of it, or if you don't want to use the total, or at least maybe it's been quite a while before you're doing a dungeon, you can also go to the history. You go to healer stat weights and you go to history, and you can see the different keys that I've done. Like I've done Motherload 11 on my Restoration Druid, I've done a Tal Desart plus 10 on my Resto Shaman, and I can use and this is history for the whole Tal Desart. This is including the trash packs, this is including the boss fights, so I can truly estimate exactly what the stat weights are going to look like for the whole of dungeon. And I can use these stat weights and I can export them to the same way that I mentioned that I did before, and I use that for 5-man specifically, because I know for those I will get a general estimate of how good my secondaries are for 5-man dungeons. Of course, they will change based on a dungeon, they will change based on an affix as well. So there's no true way to really know the absolute best secondary stats for every dungeon, for every raid boss and things like that. You can use this method and it'll get you as close as possible, but that's what I mean. Don't focus so much on secondary stats because they constantly are changing. Haste is relatively hard to evaluate and things like that, but this add-on gives you the most convenient way of knowing what secondary stats are good for you, but they're only going to be correct if you know how to play your class properly. So knowing the gameplay, the spell priority first is the most important, and then after that you can start focusing on, you know, secondary stat. But healer stat weight add-on is really great and really convenient, and I highly recommend everyone to install it and get a general look of how your secondary stats are looking in raids and 5-mans, and especially use this during progression where you're really pushing that extra healing. Thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know how you feel about this. I really appreciate the people who created this add-on. Let me know how you feel about this video, and I'll see you in my next guide.